Ever wonder how a brand new movement grapples with an ancient, sacred text from a totally different culture? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today, how the very first Christians learned to read their holy book. And believe me, it's this fascinating story about a clever mashup of ideas that pretty much shaped the entire Western world. So yeah, let's get into it.
So let's put ourselves in their shoes for a second. Early Christianity is just exploding across the Roman Empire, right? It's attracting people from all over the place. But here's the thing. Their sacred book was the Jewish scriptures, what they started calling the Old Testament. And most of these new converts, they weren't Jewish. They were Greeks, they were Romans. Their whole world was filled with different gods, different philosophies. So how on earth could they connect with a book that felt so foreign?
Well, the answer is pretty brilliant, actually. They didn't just passively read the words on the page. No, they figured out how to actively unlock them. And to pull this off, they combined two of the most powerful intellectual traditions of their time. And this right here is where the story gets really, really interesting.
Okay, so first things first, we've got to understand the book they were actually holding in their hands. Because, and this is a huge point, it wasn't the original Hebrew text. Nope. They were working with the translation, and that one little fact created some massive challenges.
This right here is the Septuagint. It gets this cool nickname, the LXX, from a legend about the 70 or so scholars who translated it. It's a Greek version of the Hebrew scriptures, and it was put together by Greek-speaking Jews in Egypt way back, centuries before Jesus was even born. Now, for the early church, we're talking the apostles, Paul, the guys who wrote the Gospels, this Greek translation was their Bible, period.
So you can see how this created a huge cultural hurdle. Just imagine for a second, you're a guy in Corinth who used to worship Zeus, and you open this book for the very first time. You don't know a single word of Hebrew. And even the Greek it's written in feels a little off, a little clunky, because it's translated. And it's just full of these stories about desert patriarchs, weird dietary laws, and tribal histories from a world that is completely alien to you. I mean, where do you even begin to find meaning in all that?
So, where do you start?
Well, the first toolkit they grabbed actually came from the very tradition the scriptures belonged to, Judaism. And it was a tradition that had always believed the written text was only the beginning of the story. So at the core of this whole approach was this idea of a dual Torah. On one hand, you have the written law. That's the text itself, the words you can see. But, and this is crucial, just as important was the oral law, this huge, living, breathing tradition of commentary and interpretation. The belief was that God's revelation wasn't just frozen in the words, but it was alive in the endless process of unpacking what those words mean.
And this whole process, this act of seeking and investigating, has a name, Midrash. See, Midrash isn't about finding one single right answer. It's an active, creative investigation to make these ancient texts speak to new situations right here, right now. And this gave the early Christians their fundamental goal, to seek out a deeper spiritual meaning that went way beyond the literal words on the page.
Okay, so they had their goal from Jewish tradition, look deeper. But what about the method? How are they actually going to do that? For that, they turned to the most powerful intellectual system of their own world, Greco-Roman Rhetoric. Now, you've got to understand, rhetoric back then wasn't just about giving a good speech. By the first century, this was a super sophisticated discipline. It had been developed for centuries by absolute giants like Aristotle and Cicero. It was the foundation of all higher education. Honestly, you can think of it as the entire liberal arts program of the Roman Empire, all rolled into one.
And Cicero, who was basically the Michael Jordan of Roman orators, summed up the whole purpose of rhetoric perfectly. He said it was about teaching the truth, captivating an audience, and ultimately moving people to action. This was a serious, serious intellectual pursuit.
And this is the absolute key. Because rhetoric taught people how to build effective communication, it also gave them the perfect toolkit for taking it apart. It's like, because they knew how to build the engine, they also knew exactly how to deconstruct it. Any educated person could take any text, a law, a philosophy book, even an epic poem like the Iliad, and analyze its structure, its style, and its literary devices. They had a system.
All right, here we go. This is the moment it all clicks together. This is where those two toolkits, the Jewish goal and the Greek method, come together in this just brilliant act of cultural and intellectual fusion.
You see how this fits together, right? It's just so elegant. The Jewish tradition of Midrash gave the early Christians their goal. Let's look beneath the surface for a deeper meaning. And then Greek rhetoric came along and gave them their tools. The high-tech analytical system to break down the text and actually find those hidden meanings was the perfect combination.
And what came out of this was a brand new way of reading. The great early Christian thinkers, the ones we now call the Church Fathers, were essentially using the literary analysis of their day, which was rhetoric, to perform a Christian version of Midrash. They were scanning these ancient stories, looking for prophecies of Christ, for moral allegories, for deep spiritual truths hidden just beneath the surface.
And don't just take my word for it. They knew exactly what they were doing. Here's Augustine of Hippo, one of the most influential thinkers in, all of Western history, and he's spelling it out for us. He's saying that the biblical authors used all the same figures of speech, he calls them tropes, that he studied in his own top-tier Roman education. He saw the Bible not as some simple, crude book, but as a work of supreme literary and rhetorical genius.
So what was the upshot of all this? What was the result? Well, this new way of reading didn't just stay tucked away in some ancient church. It had a massive, profound, and lasting impact on the entire Western world.
This wasn't just some academic exercise. This combination of Jewish purpose and Greek method completely took over. For more than 1,000 years, it was the way you read the Bible. It shaped everything from deep theology to the art you see in cathedrals. But most importantly, it solved that original problem. It gave Christians a powerful way to connect with the text from a completely different time and place. And it established this core idea in Western thought, that our most important texts have hidden layers of meaning, just waiting for us to discover them.
So, what's the big takeaway here? The early Christians built their entire understanding of the world by using the best intellectual tools they had available. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? What are our toolkits today? How do the frameworks we get from science, or the insights from psychology, or even just the way digital media is structured? How do all those things shape how we interpret the world, our most important ideas, and even our own lives? It's definitely something to think about.